The glass doors of the Stellar Crown Hotel slid open with a soft whisper, and Jake Miller stepped inside. The lobby stretched before him like a palace from ancient Earth, all marble floors and golden lights that seemed to float in the air. Humans in expensive suits walked past, talking in hushed voices. But it was not just humans. Strange beings from distant worlds moved through the space with grace. Some had blue skin that shimmered like water. Others stood on four legs with eyes that glowed softly. This was the Interstellar Peace Summit, and New Angeles had never seen so many alien visitors at once. Jake wore an old brown jacket that had seen better days. The fabric was faded and thin at the elbows. His pants were clean but plain, and his shoes had been resoled more times than he could count. He carried a small bag over his shoulder and walked with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. His face was weathered, with lines around his eyes that spoke of hard years and little sleep. He was 38 years old but looked older. He approached the front desk where a young woman with perfect hair smiled at guests. Before he could reach her, a man in a sharp black suit stepped into his path. The man's name tag read Greg Harris, manager. His hair was slicked back with too much gel and his smile did not reach his eyes. "Excuse me," Greg said, his voice loud enough that people nearby turned to look. "Can I help you with something?" Jake stopped and met his gaze. "Yes, I have a reservation." "Jake Miller." Greg looked him up and down slowly, his lips curling slightly. "A reservation. Here." "That's right," Jake said calmly. "Sir, I think there's been some mistake," Greg said, his voice growing louder. More people were watching now. A tall alien with silver skin and three eyes observed from near a marble column. "This hotel is for summit guests only. Diplomats, ambassadors, important people." "I understand," Jake replied. "I'm speaking at the summit tomorrow." Greg laughed, and it was not a kind sound. "You're speaking at the summit, right? And I'm the president of the Solar Council." He turned to the desk clerk. "Linda, did we start letting anyone off the street make reservations?" Linda looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I can check the system." "Don't bother," Greg said. He looked at Jake again with open disgust. "Look at yourself. That jacket probably costs less than my shoes. Do you know what kind of establishment this is?" Jake's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "I know exactly what kind of place this is. Now, if you'll check your system, you'll find my reservation under Admiral Patricia Scott's guest list." The word Admiral seemed to amuse Greg even more. "Oh, now you know admirals. Next, you'll tell me you're best friends with the planetary governor." He raised his voice so the entire lobby could hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation here. This is exactly why we need better security. People think they can just walk into a 5-star hotel looking like they slept under a bridge." A few humans in the lobby looked away, embarrassed. But Greg was not finished. He pulled out his comm device and called security. "Yes, I need someone at the front desk immediately. We have an individual who refuses to leave. Possible vagrant." "I'm not refusing anything," Jake said quietly. "I'm just asking you to check your system." "You're disrupting my guests," Greg snapped. "Look around you. You're making everyone uncomfortable. We have alien dignitaries here, and you're giving them a bad impression of humanity." 2 security guards arrived, large men with stern faces. Greg pointed at Jake. "Escort this gentleman out of the hotel, and make sure he doesn't come back." "Sir, if you would just check the reservation list," Jake tried once more. "I don't need to check anything," Greg said. "I know who belongs here and who doesn't, and you, my friend, definitely do not belong." The guards moved toward Jake. He raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no trouble. "All right, I'll go." "Good decision," Greg said smugly. "Maybe try the shelter on 5th Street. I hear they serve a hot meal on Sundays." A few people in the lobby gasped at the cruelty of the comment. The silver-skinned alien moved closer, its 3 eyes fixed on the scene with an expression that might have been disapproval. As the guards took Jake's arms gently, he did not resist. He let them lead him toward the door. His face remained calm, though something flickered in his eyes for just a moment. Pain, perhaps, or disappointment. But not anger. "Never anger, unbelievable," Greg announced to the lobby. "I apologize for that interruption, everyone. Please continue enjoying your stay. I assure you the Stellar Crown Hotel maintains the highest standards." A well-dressed woman whispered to her companion. That seemed harsh. Greg overheard and walked over with his practiced smile. "Ma'am, you have to understand. If we let people like that in, next thing you know, the whole place becomes a homeless shelter. We have standards to maintain. Outside, Jake stood on the hotel steps, taking a deep breath of the cool evening air. The city lights of New Angeles glowed all around him, flying cars moving through the sky like streams of light. He looked up at the stars, visible even through the city glow. Somewhere up there were worlds he had visited, battles he had fought, friends he had lost. "Sir?" A young voice spoke behind him. Jake turned to see a valet, a kid who could not have been more than 20. His name tag said Danny Carter. "I'm really sorry about what happened in there." "That wasn't right." Jake smiled, and it was a real smile. "Don't worry about it, son. Not your fault." Danny noticed the faded patch on Jake's jacket sleeve. He recognized it because his older brother wore the same one. Military Space Command. "You served?" "A long time ago," Jake said softly. "My brother's in the fleet," Danny said. "3rd Carrier Group." "Good unit," Jake replied. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a credit chip. "For your kindness." He pressed it into Danny's hand. Before Danny could respond, 3 black vehicles pulled up silently. Men and women in military uniforms stepped out. They saw Jake and immediately stood straighter. One of them, a captain, actually saluted. "Sir, we've been looking for you. Admiral Scott is concerned." "You weren't answering your comm." Jake patted his pocket. "Turned it off. Wanted a quiet walk." The captain glanced at the hotel. "Did something happen?" "Nothing important," Jake said. He climbed into the middle vehicle. "Let's go." As the vehicles pulled away, Danny stood frozen, staring at the credit chip in his hand. It was worth a month's salary. He looked up at the hotel, then back at the disappearing vehicles, his mind racing with questions. Inside the lobby, the silver-skinned alien approached Greg. "That human you removed? Who was he?" Greg waved a dismissive hand. "Nobody. Just some homeless person trying to sneak in." The alien's 3 eyes blinked slowly. "I see." But its tone suggested it saw far more than Greg realized. The night moved on. The summit preparations continued, and somewhere in the hotel's computer system, a reservation under Jake Miller's name sat unchecked, placed there by the highest authority in the Human Space Command, waiting for a guest who would never arrive. The next morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the tall windows of the Stellar Crown Hotel. Danny Carter had not slept well. He kept thinking about the man from the night before, the one Greg had thrown out. The military vehicles, the salutes. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. He arrived for his shift early and found the hotel buzzing with activity. The Interstellar Peace Summit was beginning today, and every staff member moved with nervous energy. Alien delegations filled the halls. Security personnel stood at every corner. Camera drones floated through the air, broadcasting to billions across human space and beyond. Greg Harris strutted through the lobby like a proud peacock. He had dressed in his finest suit, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. He barked orders at staff members and smiled widely at every important-looking guest. This was his moment. His hotel had been chosen for the most significant event in human history. "Danny!" Greg snapped his fingers. "Stop standing around. We have dignitaries arriving every minute. Look alive." "Yes, sir," Danny replied, but his eyes kept drifting to the front desk. He wondered if anyone had checked that reservation. The one for Jake Miller. In the grand ballroom, workers made final preparations. A massive stage dominated one end of the room. Holographic displays floated above it, showing the symbols of 12 alien civilizations alongside Earth's flag. Thousands of seats filled the space, and everyone would be occupied within the hour. Ambassador Vexrin of the Kralathi Empire arrived with his delegation. The Kralathi were impressive beings, standing 7 feet tall with deep purple skin and golden eyes. They moved with military precision, and other species gave them respectful distance. The Kralathi were known as warriors, a proud race that valued honor above all else. Vexrin spotted Greg and approached. "Manager Harris, I wish to inquire about the incident last evening." Greg's smile faltered for just a second. "Incident, Ambassador? I'm not sure what you mean." "The human you had removed from your establishment," Vexrin said, his deep voice carrying unusual weight. "I witnessed this event." "Oh, that," Greg laughed, trying to sound casual. "Just a minor security issue. A homeless person trying to get inside. Nothing to worry about." Vexrin's golden eyes studied Greg carefully. "In Kralathi culture, how a civilization treated its warriors told you everything about that civilization's worth. This person, was he truly without home? Absolutely, Greg said confidently. You could tell by looking at him. Shabby clothes, no grooming, probably hadn't worked in years. We get them sometimes, trying to take advantage of our hospitality. I see, Vexrin said slowly.
And in human culture, this is acceptable treatment?
Well, we have to maintain standards, Greg explained. I'm sure you understand. The Stellar Crown Hotel has a reputation to uphold. Vexrin said nothing more, but something in his expression made Greg uncomfortable. The ambassador turned and walked away, leaving Greg to wonder if he had said something wrong. In a private suite 3 floors above, Jake Miller stood before a mirror. He wore his dress uniform now, dark blue with gold trim. Medals covered the left side of his chest, so many they formed rows of colored ribbons in gleaming metal. Each one told a story. Each one had cost something. Admiral Patricia Scott stood behind him, her own uniform equally impressive. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. You should have called me last night, she said. I handled it, Jake replied, adjusting his collar. Jake, they threw you out of the hotel. Your hotel, where you were supposed to stay. I stayed at a motel down the street. It was fine. He turned to face her. Patricia, it doesn't matter. It matters to me, she said firmly. That manager humiliated you in front of dozens of witnesses, including alien ambassadors, Jake sighed. He didn't know who I was. He saw a guy in old clothes and made an assumption. It happens. That's exactly the problem, Patricia said. It shouldn't happen. Not to anyone, and especially not to you. I don't want special treatment. I'm not talking about special treatment. I'm talking about basic human dignity. She pulled out her comm device. The footage is already online. Someone in the lobby recorded it. It's spreading fast, Jake closed his eyes briefly. Great, Jake, listen to me. You're giving the keynote address in 2 hours. Every human in the system will be watching. Half the known galaxy will be watching. They're going to see that video, and then they're going to see you. Do you understand what that means? It means I need to focus on my speech, not on some manager who had a bad night. Patricia shook her head. You're too good for this world sometimes. You know that? A knock at the door interrupted them. A young officer entered and saluted. Admiral Captain, the summit is beginning. You're needed in the VIP section. They made their way down through private elevators, avoiding the main lobby. But even in the restricted areas, staff members stared at Jake. Some whispered. A few looked ashamed. Word had spread about what happened. The grand ballroom was filled to capacity. The front rows held alien ambassadors in all their diversity. Behind them sat human dignitaries, planetary governors, military leaders, and corporate executives. Camera drones circled overhead, their red lights blinking. Greg Harris stood near the entrance, greeting VIPs as they entered. He felt magnificent. This was the culmination of his career. He had personally overseen every detail of the summit preparation. Nothing had gone wrong. Well, except for that homeless man last night, but who cared about that? Ladies, gentlemen, and honored guests from across the stars, a voice announced over the speakers. Please take your seats. The Interstellar Peace Summit will begin in 5 minutes. Greg moved to his assigned seat in the middle section. He had hoped for a front row spot, but understood that those were reserved for people far more important than him. Still, he had a good view of the stage. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. On the stage, holographic displays came to life, showing images of Earth and the 12 alien homeworlds. Music played, something orchestral and grand. Admiral Patricia Scott walked onto the stage. The crowd applauded. She waited for silence, then began to speak. Today marks a new chapter in human history, she said. For centuries, we dreamed of reaching the stars. We dreamed of meeting other civilizations. We dreamed of taking our place among the great species of this galaxy. Today, those dreams move closer to reality. Greg leaned forward in his seat. This was good. This was really good. But before we discuss the future, Patricia continued, we must acknowledge the present, and the present is built on the shoulders of individuals who sacrificed everything, so humanity could stand here today. I want to introduce you to one such individual. A man who has served humanity with distinction for 20 years. A man who prevented a war that would have cost millions of lives. A man who survived 3 years as a prisoner, enduring torture and deprivation, yet never betrayed his people or his principles. Greg felt a strange unease building in his stomach. This man led the rescue mission that saved 2,000 colonists from a failing space station. He has been awarded the Solar Cross, the highest honor humanity can bestow. He has been wounded in combat 7 times. He has commanded fleets, negotiated with hostile species, and trained the next generation of leaders. And yesterday evening he was thrown out of this hotel for looking poor. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Greg's face went pale. Please welcome Captain Jake Miller, hero of the Draxian conflict. The screen showed the video from last night. Greg's voice rang out clearly. Look at yourself. That jacket probably cost less than my shoes. The crowd watched in stunned silence as security led Jake away. Then the screen changed to show Jake now in full dress uniform walking onto the stage. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. People stood. The alien ambassadors rose to their feet. The sound became deafening, and Greg Harris sat frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, wishing the floor would open and swallow him whole. Jake Miller stood at the center of the stage, the applause washing over him like a physical force. He waited patiently, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression calm. The lights caught the medals on his chest, making them gleam. Finally, the noise began to fade and people took their seats again. Greg Harris remained standing for a moment longer, his legs shaking. Then he collapsed into his chair, his face the color of old ash. Around him, other guests shot him disgusted looks. A woman in the next row leaned over to her companion and whispered loud enough for Greg to hear. That's the manager. The one from the video. Jake began to speak. His voice was quiet at first, but carried clearly through the excellent sound system. Thank you, Admiral Scott, for that generous introduction. And thank you all for being here today. When I was invited to speak at this summit, I was told to talk about my experiences in space, about the conflicts I've seen and the lessons I've learned. But after last night, I think I need to talk about something else. The room was absolutely silent, every eye fixed on Jake. I wore my old jacket yesterday, he continued. It was a gift from my father before he died. He was a factory worker, not a military man. He never made much money, but he taught me something valuable. He said that a person's worth has nothing to do with the clothes they wear or the credits in their account. Worth comes from how you treat others, especially when they can't do anything for you in return. Jake paused, looking out over the crowd. His eyes passed over Greg but did not stop there. Last night, a man judged me based on my appearance. He decided I didn't belong in a nice hotel because my jacket was old and my shoes were worn. He assumed I was worthless because I didn't look wealthy. And you know what? He wasn't wrong to judge me based on appearance. He was wrong to judge anyone based on appearance. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. The alien ambassadors leaned forward, listening intently. I want to tell you about someone I met during the Draxian conflict, Jake said. His name was Lieutenant Chris Hayes. He came from money, real money. His family owned mining operations on 3 moons. He could have bought and sold most of the people in this room, but when I met him, he was covered in grease, fixing a broken shuttle engine with his bare hands. He saw I was new to the unit and spent his off hours teaching me how to survive in space combat. He saved my life twice. Jake's voice grew softer. Chris died protecting a colony that couldn't afford to pay for defense. The people there were farmers, folks who barely scraped by. When his family asked me to speak at his funeral, I told them Chris never cared about money. He cared about doing what was right. That's what made him valuable. That's what made him a hero. The ballroom remained silent except for Jake's voice. I share this story because humanity is being judged right now, not by me but by our new friends from the stars. He gestured toward the alien ambassadors. They're watching how we treat each other. They're asking themselves if we're ready to join the larger community of civilized worlds. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes I wonder that myself. Greg wanted to leave. He wanted to run from the room and never come back. But moving now would draw attention, and attention was the last thing he wanted. So he sat frozen, feeling the eyes of everyone around him. We have problems, Jake said. Every species does. The Krolathi have their own struggles. The Viridians have theirs. Perfection doesn't exist. But what matters is how we respond when we see injustice. Do we ignore it? Do we accept it? Or do we stand up and say, this is not who we are? This is not who we want to be? Ambassador Vexrin nodded slowly, his golden eyes never leaving Jake. Yesterday, I was judged unfairly by one person. But I was also shown kindness by another. A young man named Danny Carter could have ignored what happened. He could have looked away like others did. Instead, he approached me and apologized for something that wasn't his fault. That tells me something important about humanity. We have people who care. We have people who recognize injustice and feel ashamed of it. That gives me hope. In the middle section, Danny Carter's face turned bright red as people around him smiled and patted his shoulder. I don't want anyone punished for what happened last night, Jake continued. I don't want revenge or retribution. I want education. I want understanding. I want us to be better than our worst moments. He looked directly at the camera drones. That's my message to humanity today. We're not perfect. We never will be. But we can choose to grow. We can choose to lift each other up instead of pushing each other down. We can choose to measure people by their character, not their bank accounts. The alien ambassadors began a strange gesture, pressing their appendages against their chests. It was a sign of respect, different for each species but universal in meaning. The stars are vast, Jake said, his voice growing stronger. Out there are wonders we can barely imagine, civilizations millions of years old, technologies that seem like magic, species that have solved problems we're still struggling with. But they're watching us and they're asking one question. Are humans ready? Are they mature enough? Are they wise enough? He paused for effect. I believe we are. Not because we're perfect, but because we're trying. Because when we see someone treated badly, most of us feel that wrongness in our gut. Because we have young people like Danny who speak up when they see injustice. Because we have people in this room right now who are ashamed of what they watched happen, even though they weren't the ones who did it. That shared sense of right and wrong, that's what makes us civilized. The applause started again, but Jake raised a hand asking for silence. I'm donating my speaking fee from this summit to two causes. First, to the Veterans Transition Foundation, which helps soldiers adjust to civilian life. Many of my friends struggle after service. They need support, not judgment. Second, to the New Angeles Homeless Coalition, because the man in shabby clothes might be someone's father. He might be someone's hero. He might be someone who just needs a chance. Now the applause could not be stopped. It rolled through the room like thunder. People stood again, many with tears in their eyes. The camera drones captured everything, broadcasting Jake's words across human space. Greg Harris sat with his head in his hands. He felt sick. He felt small. He felt like the entire galaxy was watching him, judging him, finding him lacking. And he was right. Jake finished his speech with simple words. To our alien friends, I ask for patience as we grow. To my fellow humans, I ask for compassion in how we treat each other. And to everyone watching, I ask you to remember that dignity is not bought with money. It's earned through kindness. Thank you. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Ambassador Vexrin approached the stage and did something unprecedented. He knelt before Jake, a gesture of ultimate respect in Krolothi culture. Other ambassadors followed, each showing honor in their own way. Backstage, Admiral Patricia Scott wiped her eyes. That's my boy, she whispered. In the audience, a corporate executive pulled out her comm device and began typing furiously. Within minutes, the board of directors of the Stellar Crown Hotel's parent company would be in emergency session. And in his seat, Greg Harris finally understood what he had done. He had not just insulted a man, he had revealed something ugly about himself, and now the whole galaxy knew. The worst part was not that he might lose his job. The worst part was that he deserved to. Within hours of Jake's speech, the internet exploded. The video of his humiliation at the hotel had already been spreading, but now it went from viral to supernova. Every news network across human space led with the story. Social media platforms crashed twice from the sheer volume of traffic. Even alien networks picked it up, translating Jake's words into thousands of languages. The contrast was striking. Video showed Greg Harris mocking a man in worn clothes, his voice dripping with contempt. Then it cut to that same man on stage, covered in medals, speaking with quiet dignity. The juxtaposition was powerful. People could not look away. On Mars, a teacher showed the video to her class. This, she said, is why we don't judge people by how they look. Her students, children of colonists and miners, understood immediately. Many of their parents worked hard jobs that left their clothes worn and dirty. In the orbital stations around Jupiter, military personnel gathered in rec rooms to watch Jake's speech. Some of them cried. They had all experienced similar treatment at some point. People saw the uniform and respected you. Take off the uniform and suddenly you were invisible, or worse. Greg Harris sat in his office at the hotel, his comm device buzzing nonstop. Messages poured in. Angry messages, threatening messages. His personal address had been leaked online and people promised to visit him. His hands shook as he tried to compose a response, something that would make this nightmare stop. He finally posted an apology on his personal account. "I deeply regret my actions yesterday evening. I made a terrible mistake in judgment. I apologize to Captain Miller and to everyone I offended. This does not represent who I am or what I stand for." The response was immediate and brutal. Thousands of comments appeared within minutes. "This doesn't represent who you are. We watched you. That was exactly who you are. Too little, too late. You're only sorry because you got caught. Apologizing because your career is over, not because you actually feel bad. How many other people have you treated this way when cameras weren't watching?" Greg deleted the post after an hour, but screenshots had already spread everywhere. Deleting it only made him look worse. The hotel's corporate office called. Greg's supervisor, a stern woman named Karen White, did not waste time with pleasantries. "Greg, the board wants you out, today." "Karen, please let me explain," Greg stammered. "Explain what?" "We've lost 40% of our reservations in the last 3 hours. Our stock price is dropping. We have protesters outside the building. What exactly do you want to explain?" "I didn't know who he was." "That's the problem, Greg. You should treat everyone with respect, not just people you recognize. A hotel manager who can't understand that has no business managing a hotel." The call ended. Greg sat in stunned silence. 20 years in hospitality, gone just like that. But the story was bigger than one man losing his job. It touched something deep in human consciousness. Message boards filled with people sharing their own experiences. "I'm a doctor, but I dress casually on my days off. A store security guard followed me around like I was going to steal something. When I showed him my medical ID, he didn't even apologize. I'm a software engineer who makes good money, but I like wearing band t-shirts and jeans. People treat me like I'm unemployed until they find out what I do for a living. I served 10 years in the Space Marines. After I got out, I couldn't find work for 6 months. I was living in my car. The number of people who looked at me like I was trash, you wouldn't believe." The stories went on and on, thousands of them. Millions. Everyone had experienced judgment based on appearance at some point. Jake's humiliation resonated because it was universal. The alien reaction was equally intense, though different in nature. Ambassador Vexrin gave an interview to a major news network. The Krolathi leader sat with perfect military posture, his purple skin gleaming under the studio lights. "In Krolathi culture," he explained, "warriors are honored above all others. The idea that one of your greatest heroes would be treated this way is incomprehensible to us. We have been watching humanity closely, judging whether your species is ready to join the Galactic Council. This incident troubled us deeply." The interviewer, a young woman named Lisa Banks, leaned forward. "Are you saying this might affect humanity's application?" "It was a concern," Vexrin admitted. "But then we watched how your species responded. The outrage, the shame, the collective rejection of this behavior. That told us more about humanity than any diplomatic meeting could. You are not defined by your worst individuals. You are defined by how you respond to them." Another alien ambassador, this one from the Viridian Collective, posted a statement that was translated and shared across human networks. "We have observed many species on their path to civilization. The test is never perfection. The test is growth. Humanity shows capacity for growth. This gives us confidence, but not everyone was happy with the attention. Some people thought the reaction was overblown. He's a war hero," one commentator argued on a talk show. Of course people are upset. But would we care this much if it happened to a regular person? The real problem is we only respect people with medals and titles. The comment sparked its own debate. Was the outrage only because Jake was important? Would people care if he had actually been homeless? The conversation grew more complex, more nuanced. Jake himself stayed quiet through all of this. He gave no more interviews. His comm device was turned off. He had said what he needed to say, and now he let his words stand on their own. Admiral Patricia Scott, however, did give interviews. She appeared on the largest news network and spoke bluntly. "Jake Miller is one of the finest people I've ever known. But this story isn't really about Jake. It's about how we treat each other every single day. The hotel manager who insulted Jake has probably insulted hundreds of other people who didn't have medals on their chest. Those people matter too. That's the real lesson here." Veterans organizations mobilized. They organized protests outside Stellar Crown hotels across human space. Signs read, "Heroes don't always wear uniforms," and "Dignity for all," and "Judge character, not clothes." The protests were peaceful but powerful. A petition appeared online demanding that hotels and businesses implement better training for their staff. It gathered 10 million signatures in the first day. Corporations scrambled to respond, announcing new policies and sensitivity training programs. The Stellar Crown Hotel became a symbol. People stopped booking rooms there. Reviews flooded in, many from people who had never even stayed at a Stellar Crown property. The one-star ratings buried the hotel's online presence. The parent corporation went into crisis mode. They fired Greg publicly, making a show of it. They announced a complete overhaul of their training programs. They donated money to veterans' charities. But the damage was done. The brand might never recover. Meanwhile, someone started a fundraiser for homeless veterans. The goal was 1 million credits. It reached that in 3 hours. By the end of the day, it had raised 50 million. The money would go to housing, job training, and mental health services. Danny Carter, the young valet, became a minor celebrity himself. News crews wanted to interview him. He declined most requests but did appear on one local show. "I just did what anyone should do," he said, uncomfortable with the attention. "I saw someone being treated badly and I felt wrong about it. That's all." "But you spoke up," the interviewer pressed. "Most people just watched." Danny shrugged. "My brother's a veteran. He struggled after he got out. If someone had treated him like that, I'd want somebody to stand up for him. So I figured I should do the same for someone else's brother." The interview clip went viral too. "Be like Danny" became a phrase people used. A reminder to show kindness even in small moments. And through it all, Jake Miller remained silent, letting the world process what had happened, letting people learn the lessons they needed to learn. He had planted a seed with his speech. Now he watched as it grew into something bigger than himself, something that might actually change things. That was all he had ever wanted. 3 days after the summit speech, Jake agreed to hold a press conference. He had avoided the media circus, but Admiral Patricia Scott convinced him that his silence was creating speculation. People needed to hear from him directly, not through edited clips and second-hand reports. The conference room in the Space Command headquarters was packed. Journalists from every major network squeezed into seats. Camera drones hovered at the back. Even some alien reporters attended, their translation devices humming softly. Jake entered in civilian clothes, just jeans and a simple shirt. The choice was deliberate. He sat at the table, Admiral Scott beside him, and looked out at the sea of faces. "I'll make a brief statement, then take questions," he said. His voice was steady but tired. "What happened at the hotel was unfortunate, but I don't want anyone to lose sight of the bigger picture. This isn't about one manager making a mistake. It's about a pattern we all need to recognize and change." A reporter raised her hand immediately, not waiting for Jake to finish. "Captain Miller, do you believe Greg Harris should have been fired?" Jake paused, choosing his words carefully. "I don't want anyone losing their livelihood because of me. What I want is for people to learn, to grow. Firing someone might make us feel better temporarily, but does it actually solve the problem? Or does it just make us feel righteous while the underlying issues remain?" "But he humiliated you publicly," another reporter called out. "Don't you want justice?" "Justice would be a world where this doesn't happen to anyone," Jake replied. "Justice would be people treating each other with basic dignity, regardless of appearance or status. One man losing his job doesn't achieve that." Admiral Scott leaned toward her microphone. "If I may add something, Captain Miller is being characteristically generous. The man who insulted him showed cruelty and prejudice. There should be consequences for that behavior. The hotel corporation made the right choice. But I'm asking for compassion," Jake said, glancing at Patricia. "Yes, what he did was wrong, but destroying someone completely doesn't make us better people. It just makes us feel powerful for a moment." A reporter from the New Angeles Times stood. "Captain, many veterans have come forward saying they've experienced similar discrimination. Some say they've been denied housing, jobs, and basic services because of how they look after leaving military service. What's your response?" Jake's expression grew somber. "That's the real story. What happened to me made news because of who I am. But it happens to countless people every day, former soldiers who can't find work, people with mental health issues who get judged instead of helped, individuals experiencing poverty who get treated as less than human. Those stories should matter just as much as mine. Are you saying your story isn't important? Someone asked. I'm saying my story is only important if it opens eyes to everyone else's stories, Jake answered. If this becomes about one war hero getting an apology, we've missed the point entirely. A young journalist from an online network raised her hand. Captain Miller, I have to ask, you wore that old jacket deliberately, didn't you? You could have worn your uniform. You could have called ahead to confirm your reservation. Were you testing the hotel? The room went silent. Everyone wanted to hear this answer. Jake shook his head slowly. No test, I wore my father's jacket because it comforts me. I didn't call ahead because I had a reservation and assumed that was enough. I've learned to be comfortable in my own skin, wearing what I want, not performing for others. The problem isn't that I dressed casually. The problem is that someone thought casual dress meant I deserved disrespect. But surely you know how you were perceived, the journalist pressed. Do you hear what you're asking? Jake said, his voice sharpening slightly. You're suggesting I should have dressed differently to avoid being treated poorly. That's victim blaming. That's saying people deserve bad treatment if they don't meet certain appearance standards. That's exactly the thinking we need to change. The journalist sat down, looking embarrassed. An alien reporter stood, her translator converting her clicking sounds into human language. Captain Miller, I represent the Draxian Confederacy News Service. Your actions during our conflict with humanity led to peace. Now you show similar wisdom here. My people ask, how do humans produce individuals like you while also producing individuals like the hotel manager? This confuses us, Jake smiled, a real smile. That's a good question. Humans are complicated. We're capable of great kindness and terrible cruelty, often from the same person on different days. We're young as a species, still figuring things out. The best of us try to learn from mistakes. The worst of us refuse to admit we make them. And Greg Harris, which type is he? The Draxian asked. I don't know him well enough to say, Jake admitted. I hope he's the learning type. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. Another reporter jumped in. Speaking of Greg Harris, he's issued 3 apologies now, each one longer than the last. Do you accept his apology? Apologies are easy, Jake said. Changed behavior is what matters. If he genuinely reflects on why his actions were wrong, if he becomes someone who treats all people with respect, then yes, I accept his apology. But that's between him and his conscience. I don't need his apology to move forward with my life. Have you spoken to him directly? Someone asked. No, would you? Jake considered this. If he wanted to talk, I'd listen. But I'm not seeking that conversation. I've said what I needed to say. What he does with it is his choice. Admiral Scott added, Captain Miller is demonstrating remarkable grace. I want to be clear that the military stands behind every word he said. We train our people to be warriors when necessary, but also to be ambassadors of humanity's better nature. Jake embodies both roles. A reporter from a military news service stood. Captain, you mentioned in your speech that you donated your speaking fee. That was reportedly 500,000 credits. That's a substantial amount. Why give it away? Because I don't need it, Jake said simply. I have my salary. I have a place to live. I have everything I need. That money can do more good helping veterans transition to civilian life and helping people who are struggling. Why would I keep it? Some people are saying you're virtue signaling, the reporter continued. Jake laughed, but it was not a bitter sound. Let me tell you about virtue signaling. It's when you make a big show of doing something good while actually doing nothing. I gave away money that could help real people with real problems. If that's virtue signaling, fine. I hope more people signal their virtue by actually helping others. The questions continued for another 30 minutes. Jake answered each one thoughtfully, never losing patience, never becoming defensive. He redirected praise toward others. He insisted the story was bigger than himself. He asked people to examine their own biases and behaviors. Finally, Admiral Scott called an end to the conference. Captain Miller has been generous with his time. Thank you all for coming. As they left the room, a reporter shouted one last question. Captain Miller, if you could say one thing to Greg Harris right now, what would it be? Jake stopped and turned back. He thought for a moment, then spoke clearly. I'd tell him that one mistake doesn't have to define his whole life. I'd tell him that growth requires humility, and humility requires admitting when you're wrong. I'd tell him that the easy path is to blame circumstances or make excuses. The hard path is to look in the mirror and change what you see. and I'd tell him that I believe humans are capable of taking the hard path. That includes him. With that, Jake left. Behind him, reporters frantically typed up his quotes. The press conference would be analyzed and discussed for days, but Jake's work was done. He had said what needed saying. Now it was up to humanity to decide what to do with his words. Ambassador Vexrin of the Krolathi Empire sat in his private quarters reviewing reports. The room was sparse, decorated in the Krolathi style with weapons mounted on walls and honor banners hanging from the ceiling. He had been on Earth for 2 weeks observing humanity as part of the Galactic Council's evaluation process. A chime sounded. His aide, a younger Krolathi named Zach, entered. Ambassador, the Council delegation requests a meeting. They wish to discuss the hotel incident. Vexrin nodded. Gather them in conference room 3. Include representatives from all 12 species. An hour later, the meeting convened. The room held beings of remarkable diversity. The eldest, an ancient species that looked like floating lights, hovered near the ceiling. The Viridians, plant-based beings with leaves instead of hair, sat in special chairs designed for their unique physiology. The Krolathi stood as was their custom. Others filled the remaining space, each species bringing its own perspective. We must discuss humanity, the eldest representative said, her voice like wind chimes. The evaluation period nears its end. We must make our recommendation to the council. A Draxian representative, a being covered in scales with multiple eyes, spoke next. The hotel incident concerns me. It reveals prejudice within human society. Such divisions could be problematic. Agreed, said another voice. This came from a Tertian, a species that valued logic above all else. Humans judge each other based on superficial characteristics, clothing, appearance, social status. This suggests immature thinking. Vexrin raised a hand asking for silence. With respect, my colleagues, I believe you're misinterpreting what we witnessed. Explain, the eldest said. The incident itself was indeed troubling, Vexrin began. One human treated another with disrespect based on appearance. This is wrong by any civilized standard, but watch what happened next. Within hours, billions of humans expressed outrage. They did not make excuses. They did not ignore the problem. They confronted it directly. A Viridian representative rustled her leaves, a sign of disagreement. But this suggests the problem is widespread. If it were an isolated incident, why such massive reaction? Exactly my point, Vexrin said. The reaction was so strong because humans recognized this as a pattern they wished to change. They saw themselves in that moment. Many admitted to being judged similarly or to judging others. That level of self-awareness is remarkable. The Draxian remained skeptical. In our culture, such behavior would never occur. We do not judge based on appearance. With respect, Vexrin countered, your species judges based on combat ability. You have a caste system where warriors rank above all others. Is that not also a form of prejudice? Silence followed this observation. The eldest spoke again, more thoughtfully now. Ambassador Vexrin makes a valid point. Every species has biases. The question is not whether prejudice exists, but how it is addressed. Humans are addressing it publicly, a small being from the Pixari species said. Her voice was high-pitched but clear. Our analysts have reviewed millions of their social media posts. The conversations are raw, honest, painful. They're examining their own behaviors and finding them wanting. This is healthy. But will it lead to actual change? The Tertian asked. Talk is easy. Action is difficult. Vexrin pulled up a holographic display. Look at this data. In the 3 days since the incident, 70% of major human corporations have announced new training programs. Veterans organizations have received unprecedented funding. Housing programs for the homeless have seen 1,000% increase in donations. Humans are not just talking, they're acting. The Viridian leaned forward. Still, it took public humiliation of a war hero to trigger this response. What about the countless others who face such treatment without cameras present? That is the beauty of it, Vexrin said. One incident became a mirror for millions of incidents. Humans saw this happen to their hero and asked themselves, how many times has this happened to people without medals? How many times have I been the one doing it? This kind of collective self-examination is exactly what we look for in developing species. The eldest pulsed with soft light, indicating agreement. I have observed humanity for their entire spacefaring existence. They are violent, yes. They are divided, yes. But they are also capable of remarkable growth. Each generation questions the previous generation's assumptions. They argue constantly about what is right, which means they care deeply about being right. But are they ready for the Galactic Council? The Draxian pressed. That is the question we must answer. Vexrin stood straighter, his military bearing evident. I believe they are. Not because they are perfect, but because they understand they are not perfect. The greatest danger to galactic peace is not a species with flaws. It is a species that believes it has no flaws. A murmur went through the assembled aliens. Several nodded or made equivalent gestures. The Pixari representative added, I have studied human history extensively. Do you know what I find most interesting? They keep detailed records of their worst moments, genocides, slavery, wars. They teach these horrors to their children, not to glorify them, but to ensure they are never repeated. What other species does this so thoroughly? The Kralathi do, Vexrin said. We maintain archives of our shameful past. It reminds us why we changed. I see similar wisdom in humanity's approach. The Tertian, who prided himself on logic, processed this information. Your argument is that humanity's awareness of their flaws is actually a strength. Precisely, Vexrin confirmed. A species that cannot see its problems cannot fix them. Humans see their problems with painful clarity. This incident proves it. The Viridian rustled thoughtfully. What of the individual who caused the incident? This Greg Harris. His fate matters as well. He lost his position, Vexrin said. But Captain Miller, the one who was wronged, has repeatedly asked for compassion toward him. Miller believes in redemption, in second chances. He judges Harris not by his worst moment, but by his potential for growth. Is this not also wisdom? The eldest glowed brighter. It is. Vengeance is easy. Forgiveness requires strength. Miller's response has been analyzed by every human media outlet, the Pixari said, pulling up her own display. His approval rating among humans is 97%. Not because he demanded punishment, but because he asked for understanding. Humans respect this. They aspire to it. The Draxian still hesitated. But our decision affects the entire galaxy. If we admit humanity and they prove unworthy, the consequences could be severe. Every species we have admitted carried risks, the eldest reminded them. The Kralathi were warriors who had to learn diplomacy. The Viridians were isolationists who had to learn cooperation. The Draxians were conquerors who had to learn restraint. No species joins the council perfect. They join with potential, Vexrin added. I have fought against humans and beside them, I have seen their capacity for both destruction and creation. In Captain Miller, I see the best of what they can become. In Greg Harris, I see what they are trying to leave behind. The fact that humans overwhelmingly side with Miller's approach tells me they are choosing the right path. A vote was called. Each species could vote yes, no, or abstain on recommending humanity for council membership. The eldest voted first, glowing with approval. The Kralathi followed with a strong yes. The Pixari agreed. The Viridians, after hesitation, voted yes as well. One by one, the species voted. When the count finished, 10 had voted yes. 2 had abstained. None voted no. It is decided, the eldest announced. We will recommend humanity for provisional council membership. They will have 5 years to prove themselves worthy of full membership. Vexrin felt satisfaction at the result. I will personally deliver the news to their leadership. And I believe I will request a meeting with Captain Miller as well. He should know the impact his words have had. The meeting adjourned. As the aliens left, they discussed humanity with new respect. What had seemed like a scandal revealing weakness had instead revealed strength. Not physical strength or technological prowess, but moral strength. The willingness to look honestly at oneself and say, I can be better. That evening, Vexrin recorded a personal message to the Kralathi homeworld. Today we voted to accept humanity into our alliance. Some will question this decision. Let me tell you why I believe it is correct. I have seen humans at their worst and at their best. What gives me confidence is not that they are perfect. It is that they know they are not, and they try anyway. That is the mark of a species worth standing beside. The boardroom of Stellar Crown Holdings occupied the top floor of a skyscraper in New Angeles. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city, and the ships lifting off from the spaceport in the distance. But the 12 people gathered around the long table were not admiring the view. They were in crisis mode. Helen Grant, the chief executive officer, stood at the head of the table. Her face was drawn with stress. Let me summarize where we stand. Reservations are down 60% across all properties. Our stock has lost 40% of its value. We're facing lawsuits from shareholders. Several planetary governments are investigating whether we've violated anti-discrimination laws, and we've become the most hated hotel chain in human space. Does anyone have good news? Silence answered her. I didn't think so, Helen continued. The decision to terminate Greg Harris was necessary but insufficient. The public wants more. They want to know we've learned something. They want systemic change. The chief operations officer, a man named Peter Cole, spoke up. We've already announced mandatory sensitivity training for all staff. We've updated our policies. What else can we do? That's performative, Helen said bluntly. People see through it. We need something real, something that demonstrates actual commitment to change. A woman near the end of the table raised her hand. She was younger than the others, the vice president of human resources. Her name was Nina Price. I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. At this point, I'll consider anything, Helen said. We need to talk to Captain Miller, Nina said. Not to apologize, though we should do that too. We need to ask for his help. Several board members objected immediately. Peter Cole shook his head. That's humiliating. We'd be admitting we don't know how to run our own company. We've already been humiliated, Nina countered. The whole galaxy watched us fail at basic human decency. Asking for help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. Captain Miller has credibility we lost. If he's willing to work with us, people might believe we're serious about change. Helen considered this. What would we ask him to do? Help us redesign our training programs, Nina said. Consult on our policies. Let us use his experience to build something better, and in exchange, we commit to something tangible. A program that puts our money where our mouth is. What kind of program? Helen asked. Nina pulled up a presentation on the wall screen. A partnership with veterans organizations. We commit to hiring 500 former military personnel across our properties over the next year. Not just hiring them, but providing support, mental health services, housing assistance if needed, mentorship programs. That will cost millions, the chief financial officer objected. It will cost more if we go bankrupt, Nina shot back. Which is where we're headed if we don't do something dramatic. Helen looked around the table. All in favor? After some hesitation, hands went up. The vote passed. 2 days later, Nina Price found herself in a small office at Space Command headquarters. Jake Miller sat across from her, still in civilian clothes, looking tired but attentive. Admiral Scott sat beside him, clearly protective of her protege. Captain Miller, thank you for meeting with us, Nina began. I wasn't sure I should, Jake admitted, but the Admiral convinced me to hear you out. Nina took a breath. I'll be direct, we failed. Not just Greg Harris, but all of us at Stellar Crown. We built a culture that allowed what happened to you. We're asking for your help to fix it. Why me? Jake asked. Because you understand something we forgot, Nina said. That dignity isn't something you earn. It's something everyone deserves. You could have demanded we be destroyed. Instead, you asked for understanding. That's the kind of thinking we need. Jake studied her. What exactly are you proposing? Nina explained the program, the hiring initiative, the support services, the commitment to meaningful change. We want you to help design the training program, to share your insights, to hold us accountable. And in return, Jake asked. In return, we do the right thing, Nina said. We provide real opportunities to people who served their species and deserve better. We change our culture from the ground up. We prove that companies can learn from their mistakes. Admiral Scott leaned forward. It's a good offer, Jake, but it's your call. Jake was quiet for a long moment. I have conditions. Name them, Nina said. First, this can't be about publicity. If I help, it's because I believe you're serious, not because you want to use my name to sell rooms. Agreed, Nina said immediately. Second, you bring in other organizations, veterans groups, homeless advocacy groups, civil rights experts. This isn't just about my input. It's about listening to people who live these issues every day. Done. Third, you make the program bigger. 500 people is good, but I want a pathway for more. I want this to become permanent, not a temporary fix to save your reputation. Nina glanced at Helen Grant, who had joined them via video call. Helen nodded. We accept your conditions, Captain Miller. And fourth, Jake said, his voice harder now, you find a role for Greg Harris in this program. Everyone in the room froze. What? Nina said. You heard me, Jake said. Find a role for him. Maybe not management, not at first, but something where he can learn, where he can be part of the solution. Captain, with respect, that man humiliated you, Admiral Scott said. Why would you want him involved? Because firing him and forgetting him doesn't change anything, Jake explained. He'll just go work somewhere else, maybe treat people the same way. But if he's part of building something better, if he has to face what he did every day and work to make amends, that's actual growth. That's actual justice. Nina looked stunned. You're serious? Completely, Jake said. I told the world I believe in second chances. Time to prove I meant it. Helen Grant's voice came through the speaker. Captain Miller, you continue to surprise me. All right, we'll reach out to Greg Harris. No guarantees he'll accept, but we'll offer him a position in the new program, probably starting in a training role where he learns alongside new hires. That works, Jake said. He stood and extended his hand. Then we have a deal. I'll help. But understand this. If you're not serious, if this becomes a public relations stunt, I'll walk away and I'll tell everyone why. We're serious, Nina promised, shaking his hand. You have my word. Over the following weeks, the program took shape. Jake worked with a team of experts to develop comprehensive training. It covered not just policies and procedures, but empathy and understanding. Role-playing scenarios forced staff to experience what it felt like to be judged and dismissed. Danny Carter, the young valet who had shown Jake kindness, was promoted to assistant program coordinator. His authentic care for people made him perfect for the role. And Greg Harris, after days of soul-searching, accepted the position offered to him. He would work in the training program, not as an instructor, but as a student and later as a peer mentor. He would share his story, not to excuse himself, but to warn others away from his mistakes. The first time Greg and Jake met face-to-face after the incident, it was in a conference room with the training team. Greg could barely look at Jake. Mr. Harris, Jake said, his tone neutral but not unkind. I'm glad you accepted the position. I don't deserve this chance, Greg said quietly. Maybe not, Jake agreed. But I'm not giving you this chance. I'm giving it to every person you'll help train. Every veteran you'll work with. Every future guest who won't be treated the way you treated me. That's who this is for, Greg nodded, tears in his eyes. I'll do better. I swear, prove it through actions, not words, Jake said. That's all any of us can do. The program launched with significant media attention. Critics said it was too little too late. Supporters said it was a meaningful step forward. But what mattered most was the people it helped. Veterans who had struggled to find work now had opportunities. Support services gave them tools to succeed. The culture at Stellar Crown began to shift, slowly but genuinely. 6 months after the incident, the company released data. Employee satisfaction was up. Guest complaints were down. The new hires were performing well, many excelling. Stock prices began recovering. And while Stellar Crown would never fully escape the shadow of what happened, they were building something new from the ruins of their reputation. Jake remained involved, but stepped back from the spotlight. He had done what he could. The rest was up to the people doing the daily work of change. That was how real progress happened. Not through grand gestures, but through countless small actions repeated over time, by people committed to being better than they were before. The final day of the Interstellar Peace Summit arrived with ceremony and significance. The grand ballroom of the Stellar Crown Hotel, despite its tarnished reputation, remained the venue. The organizers had considered moving it, but Jake himself suggested they stay. Running away from uncomfortable places doesn't solve anything, he said. Sometimes you have to stand in the spot where things went wrong and prove you can do better. The room was filled to capacity again, but the atmosphere felt different from the opening day. There was weight in the air, anticipation mixed with hope and nervousness. Humans and aliens sat together, some species having formed unexpected friendships during the 2-week summit. Ambassador Vexrin stood at the podium, his purple skin gleaming under the lights. Behind him, representatives from all 12 alien civilizations sat in a semicircle, their presence itself a statement. People of Earth, Vexrin began, his voice resonating through the excellent sound system. We came to your world with questions. We came with doubts. We came to evaluate whether humanity was ready to join the Galactic Council as provisional members. Today we have our answer. The room went silent. Every human held their breath. 2 weeks ago I witnessed an incident in this very building, Vexrin continued. A decorated war hero was judged by his appearance and removed from this establishment. I was troubled by this. My colleagues were troubled. We questioned whether a species that treats its own heroes so poorly could be trusted on the galactic stage. Greg Harris, sitting in the back row as part of his training program duties, closed his eyes. The shame never quite left him even months later. But then something remarkable happened, Vexren said. We watched humanity's response. Not just the response of leaders or politicians, but of ordinary people. Billions of voices rose in collective outrage. Humans did not make excuses. They did not minimize the problem. They confronted it directly, honestly, and with genuine shame. He paused, letting his words sink in. In Kralathi culture, we judge a civilization not by the absence of flaws, but by how they respond when flaws are revealed. Do they hide them? Do they justify them? Or do they acknowledge them and work to improve? Humanity chose the third path. That choice speaks volumes. A murmur of hope rippled through the human attendees. The eldest representative floated forward, her light form pulsing gently. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. I have existed for 3,000 of your years. I have observed countless species at this crucial stage of development. The transition from planetary civilization to galactic citizen is treacherous. Many fail, some through arrogance, believing they are perfect, others through despair, believing they are irredeemable. The successful ones understand a simple truth. Growth is eternal. Progress never ends, she pulsed brighter. Humans understand this. You carry your history with brutal honesty. You teach your children about your mistakes. You argue constantly about how to be better. This arguing, this endless questioning, this is not weakness. It is your greatest strength. Jake Miller sat in the front row between Admiral Scott and Danny Carter. He had not expected to be so moved by the eldest's words. She had seen 3 millennia of history, and she thought humanity had potential. That meant something. A Viridian representative stood, her leaves rustling with emotion. We nearly voted against humanity's inclusion. We are a peaceful species, and we feared your violent history. But then we realized something. Every species that achieved peace did so by first understanding violence. You cannot reject war if you have never experienced it. You cannot value peace if you have never known conflict. Humanity knows both deeply. This makes you wise, not dangerous. One by one, each alien species shared their perspective. The Draxians spoke of humanity's resilience. The Pixari praised human creativity. The Tertians acknowledged human logic mixed with emotion. A rare combination they found intriguing. Each speech built on the previous one, creating a tapestry of respect and cautious optimism. Finally, Vexren returned to the podium. The Galactic Council has made its decision. By vote of 10 species in favor, 2 abstaining, and none opposed, we recommend that humanity be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The room erupted. Humans leaped to their feet, cheering and crying. Aliens made their own gestures of celebration, each species in their unique way. The moment was historic, a turning point for Earth and all its people. Provisional membership lasts 5 years, Vexren continued when the noise subsided. During this time, humanity will participate in council affairs but will not have full voting rights. You will be observed, guided, and evaluated. At the end of 5 years, the council will vote on whether to grant full membership. We believe you will earn it. Admiral Scott stood and saluted the alien delegation. Around the room, military personnel followed suit. Then, in a spontaneous gesture, civilians began standing and placing hands over their hearts. It was a moment of unity, rare and precious. There is one more thing, Vexren said. The Council wishes to acknowledge an individual whose actions influenced our decision. Captain Jake Miller, please join me on stage. Jake hesitated, then walked to the stage with his characteristic slight limp. The applause that greeted him was deafening. Vexren turned to face Jake directly. Captain Miller, your species often produces individuals of extraordinary character. You are one such individual. But more importantly, your response to injustice helped your entire species. You could have demanded vengeance. You chose wisdom. You could have used your status to gain advantage. You chose humility. You could have let bitterness consume you. You chose forgiveness. The Kralathi ambassador did something then that shocked every human in the room. He knelt before Jake, a gesture of ultimate respect in his culture. The other alien representatives followed, each showing honor in their own cultural way. We do not kneel for rank or medals. Vexrin said from his kneeling position. "We kneel for character. You have shown us what humanity can become. You have shown us why your species deserves its place among the stars." Jake, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, helped Vexrin to his feet. "Ambassador, you honor me beyond what I deserve. But I'm just one person. Humanity is billions of people, most of whom are trying their best every day. If you're impressed by me, wait until you get to know the rest of us. We're flawed and complicated, but we're also capable of remarkable kindness. That's who we really are." The eldest floated forward. "Captain Miller, we ask one thing of you. In 5 years, when we evaluate humanity for full membership, will you speak for your species again?" "If you'll have me," Jake said. "But I hope by then you won't need my words. I hope you'll have seen enough of humanity to make your own judgment." "We hope so too," the eldest said. "But your voice carries weight. Use it well." The ceremony continued with formal declarations and treaty signings. But the emotional peak had passed. What remained was administrative work, important but less dramatic. After the official proceedings ended, Jake slipped away from the celebration. He found himself outside on the hotel steps, the same spot where he had stood months ago after being thrown out. The evening air was cool and the city lights painted the sky. Danny Carter found him there. "Captain Miller, they're looking for you inside." "Press wants interviews." "Let them look a bit longer," Jake said with a small smile. "I needed some air." Danny stood beside him, looking out at the city. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you think things will really change? Or will people forget about all this in a few months?" Jake considered the question. "Some people will forget. Some never cared in the first place. But others will remember. They'll carry this forward. Change doesn't happen all at once, Danny. It happens one person at a time, making one better choice at a time. You made a good choice that night, showing kindness to a stranger. Greg Harris is making better choices now, trying to be better than he was. Millions of people are examining their own behaviors and trying to improve. That's how progress happens. But what about the people who don't change?" Danny asked. "They'll get left behind," Jake said simply. "The universe moves forward. You can move with it or get swept aside. Most people, when given the choice, prefer to move forward." Inside the hotel, Greg Harris watched the celebrations from a distance. He was not ready to join them, not yet. Perhaps he never would be. But he was doing the work. Every day he met with veterans who needed support. He listened to their stories. He helped them navigate the program he had once scoffed at. It was hard work, humbling work, but it was changing him in ways he could not have predicted. A woman approached him, one of the veteran program participants. Her name was Rachel, and she had served on the outer colonies. "Greg, thanks for your help today with the housing paperwork. Made a difference." "Just doing my job," Greg said. "No," Rachel said. "You're doing more than that. You're doing the right thing. That matters." After she left, Greg found himself crying quietly. Doing the right thing. Such simple words, but they meant everything. He had spent years doing his job without thinking about whether it was right. Now finally, he was learning the difference. As the night wore on, the summit concluded. Aliens departed for their ships, carrying with them new impressions of humanity. The Krolathi left with respect. The Viridians left with curiosity.